get to know a lot of insights about Microsoft Forms. I've told you Enea is the second time to our Power Platform bootcamp from Saarbrücken, and he's presenting together with Robin. So, Robin, Enea, would you like to share your screen?
Let's set up everything really quickly. Thank you very much, Diana.
Yes, thank you.
Enea, you start?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, and thank you for having us, dear Orbis team. Today, we're going to talk about a tool from Microsoft, which is widely used from a lot of companies, and it's a very useful tool, very easy to set up, and it's been used as a data gathering option for very different scenarios. And there is a documented part of Microsoft Forms, which most of us already know how to use it, how to set it up, and also how to automate it in combination with Power Automate. And as we probably are familiar, the ones who have already done it, you can set up a Power Automate flow, which gets triggered every time you submit a Microsoft Forms form. And that then from that part, then you can decide what you do with that data. But what if we decide to not trigger the Power Automate flow by every submission, but we want to get that data all at once, maybe once in a week or once in a month? And there is a Forms API somewhere back there, and we found it, and we also experimented a little bit. And Robin, if you want to move to the next screen, we can show you what we planned for today. But before that,
first of course, let's introduce ourselves.
Yeah. Let's introduce ourselves first. Yeah. You want to go first, or should I go first?
I go first, and you can take it off from there. So yeah, well, Diana already introduced us. So I'm especially really happy to be here because you said there are people from all over the world, but I am actually one of those few people who were born in Saarbrücken. Right now, I'm living near Stuttgart in southern Germany. But like I said, born in Saarbrücken and lived there for the first few years and have still strong ties to Saarbrücken. So if you're ever planning a live event, just count me in. I'm coming as a speaker or just to meet you guys, listen to sessions at the Orbis office in Saarbrücken. Yeah, and the connecting thing between Enea and me is probably that we are both doing YouTube, and we're looking for something we could collaborate on, and we did a live session on that topic last year, but it's a perfect topic to bring it up again and sum it up in a little bit shorter time frame today. So I'm posting the link after our session. If you want to get the full longer experience, then you could probably re-watch this. And yeah, our YouTube channels are down there, so check them out afterwards. We both have great content, I think, for various Power Platform topics.
Yeah, and shortly about me, I was born very far away from Saarbrücken, actually. But nonetheless, I've been living in Cologne now for, I think, 6 to 7 years. And Germany has become my second home. And yeah, I'm a Power Platform consultant at Nova Capta. And I also do some YouTube videos on my free time, which I really enjoy. And yeah, Zweibrücken, maybe. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here today. Thanks for having us. So the agenda, as I shortly described 3 slides before, is today about the Forms API, and we're going to take a look on where to find that API and how we can find the URI that we need to call that API. Then we'll continue, Robin will continue to show you how to create a Forms custom connector, or at least a glimpse at how to do that, not the whole connector, since we're a little bit limited on the time. And also show you how you can set up the authorization, also a shorter part. And then how we can use those two components to create, update, and delete forms dynamically from, for example, a Power App. And later, I will also show you a real quick demo on how to get those responses into Power BI, since we all know Forms is used for gathering data and information, and what is a better place to show that data and to visualize that data than Power BI.
You take over, and I think
Yes.
we jump right into demo mode, right?
Exactly. So I will share my screen. Let me know when you can see something.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I've already prepared a quick forms form. And yeah, I was not that imaginative, so I took a company car order. So I've already created here, or I've already submitted a couple of responses. We can see here there are 2 responses submitted. And the normal way to get this data is we can go here and say open in Excel. And then we have that data exported. But that's something that we need to do manually. We need to go manually into this edit mode and pull the data out of forms. But we can do it also differently. So to show you how that can be done, let me go in the preview mode, and I'm going to start creating or start submitting one of these forms. So I'm going to write here my name, last name, just an employee ID, preferred manufacturer, Audi for personal reasons, automatic, and diesel, and approximate date needed. It is, let's say, towards the end of the year. And before submitting it, I'm going to select here the F12, if my keyboard will allow me. Let's try it here. More tools, developer tools. So we are here in the developer tools, and we need to go to the network section. As we see, that has nothing been triggered yet. So by submitting this, we will see here that we have 2 or more network API calls. And if I make this a bit larger, we have here one which is called responses. If we expand that, we can see here that we have this request URL. And this is the Forms Office API, Form API, blah, blah. And we have the user's ID, and this in here is also the Forms ID, which we usually use when we do that normal when a response is submitted workflow, and \responses. So this is the URI that we need to copy. Next, I'm going to Power Automate. I'm going to create a new workflow. You can decide if it's going to be automated or not, but in my case, just to showcase, it's going to be a manual trigger flow. I'm going to call it get forms data, and I'm going to select create. And the interesting part, which we discovered, is that to do this API call to forms, you don't need to use the send an HTTP request to you don't need to use the HTTP request connector, which is premium, but you can use the send an HTTP request request to SharePoint, which is a standard connector. And this is going to be a get method. And what we are going to use here is not the whole URI, of course, but only this part here. I'm going to delete everything else. And this is the forms.office.com. So it will complain at first, but of course I need to enter it as a custom value, otherwise it will not let me. Let me delete this part here. And now it's still going to complain, but if you click away, it will not complain anymore. And in the URI, we need to have the rest of the code of the URI. So I'm going to delete this part here, which is already in the site address. And by setting it up this way, you are now able to send an HTTP request to that forms connector. We can leave the headers and the body as it is. And I'm going to save it. And by testing, we can see, allow me now, test. Sign in first, run flow, done, and says the flow ran successfully. And what we can see here, if I close this, if I go back, we have here these 3 responses. No, 1, 2, 3. Sorry, these are the questions. We have here 3 responses. And what we can see here is that we sent an HTTP request to this URI. And by showing the raw outputs, we can see here that we have inside the body our 1, 2, 3 responses. And I wish I could make it a bit wider, but what you can see here is my latest response. I think it's this one here. Yeah, this one here, ID 3. And we have here the start date, submit date, which is when I started filling out the questions and when I submitted it. So we can do some logic there on how long that takes to answer. And we have here the responder, which is my demo account, the responder name, and the questions are unfortunately all put in one JSON string. So there is some extra work needed there to be done for you to extract those answers. But I'm not going to go into that detail now, since we're limited on time and I need to give over to Robin soon. But as you can see, it's all there, and you can then extract it by splitting that string as well. And you have some also some other information here that can be used. And this way you can pull this data at once, and then you decide what you do with that. Maybe you bring it to Power BI or to another storage system, and yeah, you save those API calls for every submission if you don't need that after every submission. That's it, first. Robin, back to you.
Yes, I'm going to take it over from here and just expand a little bit on the things Enea just showed. Because what we're now trying to do is getting other API endpoints, not just the responses endpoint. And then we're looking for the authentication, because they won't work actually with the HTTP to SharePoint request. We need to care for authentication. And then we want to get everything into a custom connector so we can handle it with Power Apps, because Enea is the Power BI guy of our duo, and I'm more into Power Apps. So we're coming, of course, he also knows Power Apps very well, but yeah, we are probably looking sometimes from 2 different angles to similar problems. So my actual use case was that I wanted to alter a form after some things occurred. So probably we have different time slots, and when someone registers for a time slot, I want this time slot to be blocked, to be gone from the form. And of course, I want to automate the process, and I don't want to do it manually. So after Enea did a video on that, I was thinking, let's take a closer look at that. What else can we do? Can we find some more of that API? So when we are now in edit mode of a form, then what we're doing here is adding the questions. Pretty easy. You all probably have done that. Again, we are hitting F12 here right now. Get everything cleared right here, and then we add a new question right here. Let's add a choice question. And then again, we can look at this endpoint. This is called questions right now. Looks pretty similar to the thing Enea just showed you, but in the end here, it's the questions endpoint. And the post question, we can also patch questions. And there are, I will show you about 10 endpoints in a second that I gathered, like creating forms, deleting questions, creating questions, changing questions, and so on. So everything what you are doing right here in this editor, you can also do through the API. But of course, like the Microsoft we know and love, there's no documentation at all about this form. I found a little bit online on different forums that people were trying to achieve similar things like Enea and me. So we keep this URL in mind, and it's really easy to analyze. This is your tenant ID, this is your user ID, and this is the forms ID right here. Forms ID, for example, you can get it from here. Or, of course, you can get it through another API call where you read all your forms. Now let's take a closer look at a custom connector. I don't want to get into detail how we create a custom connector, but it's actually, it looks scary at first, but it's actually a really easy process if you've done it a few times. Let's go to the first at the general screen right here. So again, we are using this formsoffice.com endpoint. Authorization we'll deal with in a second. And then there are our 9 endpoints, like I just said, for creating a form, or what we just did was posting a question. And again, looking through the DevTools right here, we can also see the payload. So we are seeing what is the API sending, and it's actually not too complicated to figure everything out. It's sending an ID. You can make that up yourself. If it's a quiz, if you have worked with forms a little bit, you know this option to add quizzes. This is just an integer for order. And this is the interesting part. This is where we define the question itself, what kind of question. It's a choices question. And then you can put in the choices right here. And you see it's a JSON object, but escaped inside of a string. So we can work around that. And we can bring all of that. So just copy it, bring it to your custom connector, define a new endpoint with exactly that. We will make tenant ID variable, user ID variable, and the form ID variable parameters. And then we have the body, and there we just see these things right here we just looked at. The actual process of creating that is far easier. You just copy and paste an example object, just like the HTTP, just like the Power Automate parse JSON, where you put in an example object and get the whole structure out. And it will create all of these for you, and you can change some things afterwards. And then we can test this, and let's try to create a new form. Create form, and we call it why is Saarbrücken the best city in the world? And I provided my tenant ID, my user ID. I hit test operation right here. I get 201 back, means it was a success. And then we go back to our forms screen, and it just hopefully worked. I created a forms without any question at the moment through the API. So didn't do it through the forms forms.com here, but through the API test section in my custom connector. And yeah, now let's talk quickly, really briefly about the authorization. So you know how to set that up. We need to set up app registration in our Azure portal. And this is really similar to the Graph API. When you have ever used that inside of Power Apps or Power Automate, you know that you have to set this up right here. Also scary at first, but actually not that complicated at all. We have to talk about the permissions for a second. So like I said, Graph API is this big thing right here. And then you have this endpoint where you want to authorize you for. And the forms is a little bit more hidden. So here you find all the main ones like SharePoint, Dataverse, and so on. And Microsoft Forms is a little bit more hidden. So you go to this tab right here, and then you find Microsoft Forms. And then we see the reason why you can use the HTTP request to SharePoint for the one part that Enea showed, but you can't use it to change your forms because these are different permission settings. So if you just want to read the responses or write new responses, this is one set of permissions. But to really change the form, this is a whole different set of permissions. So you have to grant these permissions and then use our app registration to authorize through our OAuth 2 flow, which, yeah, pretty much the same as you would authorize against for the Graph API. you will find many videos and blog posts how to set it up, or like I said, I will post our video afterwards where you can where we're going through this whole process. So let's really quickly look into the app that I built around that API. When I click Get Forms right here, then this form was added because I'm doing the API call to get all the forms that are from my personal account. And let's switch a bit, and now we can change that form through an API, through the API right here. So we want to post new question. We will add a text field, a choice question with 5 choices. We will add a rating field with hearts and a daytime field. Could of course change the names. And now let's take a quick look here. And this is everything we just created is now in the forms. It was empty a second ago. You saw that I didn't touch anything. I did it through the Power App, through my custom connector. And we can also just want to highlight this because I think it's the coolest PCF in the world. Can also change the order, click update order, and go back to the forms, and then the state field should move up to the top. Or the choice field, didn't know, probably. Yeah, the choice field was the thing that I moved to the top. And of course, you can also use this API to use it in Power Automate, to automate things. And just for the thing that I just said, so a user registers for one date, and afterwards you filter that option out of the choice options and update it through the API, and that choice option is gone afterwards. It's a little tedious to work with the objects you need to provide for everything, for changing questions, but it will actually work. Let me show you really quickly. We will select this, and then we will deselect these 3 options right here, patch the question, and now the options 2, 3, and 4 should be gone. And only 1 and 5 remain. Yeah, you see, with a little bit of creativity, you can probably do a lot with this API, like generating forms for each session for today, probably. If you don't want to do that manually, you could do that automatically, read out the URL with another endpoint, and then automatically send it to users. And then you could, of course, like Enea will show you in a second, bring the responses automatically back to Power BI, and let's see how that works out.
Thank you, Robin. Awesome presentation. So let me share my screen again. You can see, right?
Yeah.
So we left it here. So we now had seen how we can get that data from Power Automate using the standard connector. And we also saw how we can do that with a little bit more work and a little bit more premium using a custom connector. So it's up to you if you decide to go that way or this way. But if you go, if you stick on the custom on the standard connector, what we can do next is we can decide where we want to bring the data. Up until now, we have been using maybe an apply to each to write this data in the SharePoint or maybe into the Dataverse table or wherever. But since we're trying now to bring all the data at once, we can do something differently. And I'm going to go to edit again. And it's just a simple step, which is called create file. If I could write it right, file. And you can choose if you're going to create it in OneDrive for Business or in SharePoint. I will go with SharePoint since it's a bit easier. And I have this demo site here called Project Management and the standard documents folder, which I'm going to use. And I'm going to select that, and I'm going to write here the name of the folder, which is Shared Documents. And the file name will be, I've written it here somewhere, forms responses.json. It's important to have ending as well, so that it gets recognized. And we want here also to have the value, which I've already prepared here. And as you can see, this is just from the body, which comes from the action above. And we have the ending question mark value, because we don't need the whole value body, but we need only the value, the part. And that's it, actually. If I select here test, manually save and test, we should end up here with a newly created file called forms responses. And it should be in a JSON format, or it can not work as of now. Did I write anything wrong? Yeah, I have a mistake. Got to put a space there. Try that again. And my flow ran successfully. So if I refresh my library, I should see here my JSON form, forms responses. If I open it, these are the responses that we have. No, that's only the body. As you can see, ID1 and ID2 and so on, ID3 somewhere. Okay, so now we have this file in our folder. And what we can do next is we can go to Power BI and say get data, more. And this will be a JSON file. Let's say connect. I'm sorry, that was wrong. That's not a JSON file, of course. A JSON file would be if I would upload it manually from my local file. This will be, of course, from SharePoint. So I'm going to write SharePoint, and I'm going to say SharePoint folder, and connect to my SharePoint site URL, which I need to grab real quick. And the site URL will be, I imagine, up until this point there. Paste that in there, select OK. It's establishing the connection, and it already found the only file which is in there. I'm going to say transform data. And that will open Power Query, and we can see here the metadata of that file and the extension and so on. So what I'm going to do is just I'm going to say combine the files, and this will then evaluate the query and do all the steps for me. You can see, you'll see in a second on the right-hand side to create that table based on the JSON structure, which is actually pretty easy. It takes a couple of seconds, but it should be almost done now. And what we end up, as you can see here, with all this transformation being done for us, here a couple of steps, and we have here our 3 responses that we saw also in our forms editor. Also, again, as I said, we have here this answers column, which has the answers, as you can see here at the bottom, put all together in one JSON format string. And we have here for this ID1, the answer and the question ID. Here again, answer, question ID, and so on and so forth. So what we need to do here is we need to split this up and to extract it. Keep in mind that one form ID has multiple answers normally. So if you want to keep this clean, I will suggest you extract or you create another table with this column, and where you keep, for example, the ID of the form only, and then only the answers. So that way you can create a simple model where you have the form ID and the name, and that will be having distinct values. And then you have another table with all the answers where it has multiple values with the same ID. And then you can create a simple model with a one-to-many relationship between the forms and the answers. And that way you can then continue, create a visualization in Power BI and display the data. I think that's it also from my side. We can go always deeper in these topics, but I think my time is almost up. So I don't know, I think 5 minutes, or we have 5 minutes if you have any questions, or maybe if you know a better way, maybe we don't need to create that file in SharePoint. Maybe there's a way to connect directly from Power BI. Feel free to experiment or to reach out to us and with maybe new ideas. And we're happy to work together on this topic further, since we both found it very cool and interesting. Yeah, but I think we're open for questions for a couple of minutes.
Wow, that's amazing. It makes fun to take control of everything there, right?
Sure, definitely.
It just feels like doing something forbidden if you sneak around in these APIs and then.
Oh, I feel with you. I do the same. Just push the limit if it helps. But I guess sometimes we have to take care how far we push that, because it could stop working if it's not documented. We know that that kind of dance with SDK, but I love to be able to do stuff since they are there. So we just take advantage of it.
We also have a question: is it possible to save all the data in a SharePoint list? I mean, of course, that's the grandfather of form saving storage. So we know that that's possible, definitely. But you can decide where you save the data, of course. It was more of how you get the data, no? And
Enea said it in the beginning. The easiest way is probably to, if you don't want to handle all these complicated API calls, the easiest way is to get every response one by one and get the flow triggered when the response is submitted, and then write it into a SharePoint list. This is the actually the easiest way to get it into SharePoint, but that would be boring, and of course you can do much more with the things we just showed.
Okay. If there are no more questions, I will stop sharing my screen. And
thank you very much.
You,
I don't see some more questions right now. I've posted some information for you, so in case somebody has more questions, can contact you on LinkedIn. I've posted your blogs and YouTube channels in the chat. Well, if there are no more questions, I guess we can make a short break until 10 minutes for 11, and there we can start with our next session with Prashant. Well, I guess I'm gonna share the screen in the meantime. I fight all the time with that.